Yes, how are we all? I hope all is well. My name is Sachin, and this is the Total Cricket Podcast, episode 34. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the second test between Bangladesh and Australia, so let's get right into it. Australia won this one by 7 wickets, meaning that the spoils were shared in this series. It finished 1-all, a very good comeback from Australia after that defeat in the first game. Now, I'll begin with the team news, and Bangladesh, they made one change with Shafiul Islam dropping out for Mominul Haq, and Australia, they made two changes. One was enforced with Josh Hazlewood dropping out due to injury. He was replaced by Steve O'Keefe, and Usman Khawaja was dropped. In came Hilton Cartwright. Now let's get into the recap, and Bangladesh once again won the toss and had no hesitation in batting first on a pitch that was a lot flatter than the one in Mirpur, but as the test went on, took more spin and more uneven bounce. They got a decent first innings total. I think they would have liked more, 305, and it wasn't looking good at one stage. They were reduced to 117 for 5, but then a very nice partnership between Mushfiq and Sabir for the 6th wicket. They put on 105, really resurrected the Bangladeshi innings, and both getting half centuries, Mushfiq getting 68 and Sabir getting 66, and then Nasir Hussain's 45 also helped Bangladesh get up past that 300 mark. The Australian bowlers in the first innings, Nathan Lyon, the chief destroyer yet again, 7 for 94 for Nathan Lyon. Ashton Agar, the only other bowler to take a wicket, he got 2 for 52. Steve O'Keefe went wicketless on his return. Pat Cummins, he really toiled hard in those conditions, but he was not rewarded for his efforts. And then there was some overs bowled by the part-timers, Glenn Maxwell and Hilton Cartwright. But Australia's reply was pretty decent. They managed 377, and the man who made that happen was David Warner with a second consecutive test ton in Asia, 123 off 234 deliveries for David Warner. He was supported by Stephen Smith with 58 and Peter Hanscom with 82, but the wheels did fall off for Australia in this innings, losing their last 7 wickets for 79 runs. So that lead could have been a lot more for them. Bangladesh's bowlers, Mustafizur Rahman was the pick of the bowlers. He took 4 wickets. Mehedi Hassan, he got 3. Shakib and Taijul got 1 apiece. And then Nasir Hussain, Mominul, and Sabir, they all bowled a few overs of part-time spin to no avail. But in the end, that collapse didn't really matter for Australia. Bangladesh were absolutely blasted out for 157 by Nathan Lyon. Yet again, 6 for 60 for Lyon. Steve O'Keefe picking up 2, as did Pat Cummins. The Bangladeshi batsmen, very little resistance. They were reduced to 43 for 5 at one stage, but again, it was Sabir and Mushfiq that provided some resistance. Mominul Haq as well did a decent job. They got 31, 24, and 29 respectively to help Bangladesh get some sort of a target on the board for Australia. That turned out to be 86, but really still nowhere near enough to trouble Australia. I think 150 plus and it would have been game on, but 86, not really enough to test the Australians. And with rain being an imminent threat on the 5th day, Australia looked to finish it very quickly in the last session on day 4, and that's exactly what they did. They knocked off the runs in just the 15.3 overs. They did lose 3 wickets, but that was really due to their intent. Few starts, but it was Peter Hanscom and Glenn Maxwell with 16 not out and 25 not out that guided Australia home in the end. Mustafizur, Shakib, and Taijul all got a wicket apiece, but that did not really mean much in the grand scheme of things. Australia winning the game by 7 wickets and levelling the series 1 game all. I must say it's a real shame that there wasn't a deciding test. We've seen Bangladesh play a lot of 1-all series recently. We saw the one against England at the end of last year, at the start of this year against Sri Lanka, and now here, I think it's time that Bangladesh got 3 test series. So hopefully that is around the corner, because they certainly are competitive enough now to warrant such series. Let's get into the breakdown, and I'll begin with Australia, and this was a fantastic victory for Australia. After that loss in the first game, it was a damaging defeat. But to turn that around after losing the toss, I think it was a credit to them. And when you look at the series as a whole, I think they'll take the 1-1 result. Let's put some perspective on this for Australia. They came into this series, they hadn't played Test cricket for 4 months. A lot of players hadn't played competitive cricket for months due to the pay dispute. And then their only warm up game was washed out. So they came in lacking match practice, and it showed in the first game. But this game, they really did a good job. And I must say that their last two tours of Asia have been promising. We know that their record in Asia over the last decade has been terrible. The reality is they haven't won any of their last 5 Test series in Asia, but the 2-1 loss in India, they put up a really good fight. And now here, 1-1 against Bangladesh, considering they lost both tosses as well, and considering they were able to come back from that defeat in the first game, I think it's positive for Australia. Yes, it's not like they're the kings of Asia now. There has to be some balance, but there are signs that they're getting better in Asia. So that can only be a good thing for Australia. And I'll begin with the batting. And Matt Renshaw, he had another difficult test. And for Matt Renshaw, the issue I felt has been the issue throughout this series. In fact, throughout his time in Asia, both in the India series and this one, was he's got out a lot to the spin, playing for the spin. If you have a look at his dismissals in this test, it was pretty unlucky. The first innings where he got strangled down the leg side by Mustafizur. I talk about when you get strangled down the leg side, there's a little bit of bad luck, but also a little bit of bad technique when you get your hands outside your eye line. But for Matt Renshaw, it hasn't been the issue for him that. What's been the issue is what we saw in the second innings, where admittedly there wasn't much on the line, but he played for the spin against Shakib. There wasn't any, and he got an outside edge through to Mushfiqur Rahman, and we saw that as well in the first test, where he was getting LBW, looking for spin against Mehedi when there wasn't. And for Renshaw, this is a learning curve. These last two series, he's averaged 25 across them, which is not great. Hasn't been able to register 100, just the 250s, but he's clearly a talented batsman, Matt Renshaw. It would be silly for Australia to discard him. He's only 21 years old. I love his temperament. I love the way he applies himself. Playing in Asia is difficult for non-Asian batsmen, and he hasn't had much experience in these conditions, so hopefully he learns that you're better off playing the line, playing for no spin. And if it spins, hey, you got to accept that. But particularly on this pitch that wasn't turning as much as the Mirpur pitch, I think you have to do that. And we've seen guys like Steve Smith and David Warner adopt this approach where you need to just play the line of the ball. So as he gets more experience in these conditions, I expect Matt Renshaw to develop. And he's primed for a strong Ashes series. I feel he averaged 63 in Australia at the start of his Test career in the 5 games he played. So I see no reason to worry too much about Matt Renshaw in the long run. David Warner, fantastic yet again, and this has been a breakthrough series for David Warner. He was the top scorer. He got 251 runs, and his average in Asia climbed from 29 to 35, much more respectable for David Warner. That was the real question over his head, that he couldn't play high-quality spin in difficult conditions, that he was just a flat-track bully. Well, he has absolutely knocked those claims out of the park as David Warner in this series. And while we saw in the first innings, in that second innings, he played a very typical David Warner innings, asserting himself against the bowlers. This was a completely different David Warner we saw in the first innings. It was his slowest Test ton by some distance. It took him 209 balls, and his previous slowest had taken 154. To see that other string to his bow, that he's able to adapt his game. He's not just a 2020 player almost, if you like. He's actually evolved into a true Test batsman, realized that this pitch was quite slow and it wasn't going to be easy to score fast. He played the balls on their merit. He hit the bad balls to the boundary, doing what any good batsman should do. He had good plans against the spin, and he was still able to assert himself, not get bogged down. That was the key. That's what we saw in recent series in Sri Lanka, in India. David Warner was just a little bit too negative. And I love the fact that he was able to be proactive, but still play the ball on its merit. He found a great balance, did David Warner. in this game, and it was a fantastic knock of 123. He was, if anything, a little bit surprised by the ball from Mustafizur Rahman that got him a bouncer that he really just fended straight to Imrul Kayes at leg gully. And in the second innings, trying to get things done quickly, held out to mid wicket. I wouldn't look too much into that. But fantastic from David Warner. I think it's fair to say now that he is a complete test batsman, that he has all the strings to his bow that you need now, David Warner. And I think it's a credit to the new age of cricket. David Warner is a guy who started his career as a 2020 player, and he was pigeonholed there, but slowly but surely came into the test team on the back of very little first-class cricket, and over the years has developed into, I would say, a top 10 test batsman in the world. I think that's a credit to modern cricket, where we're seeing not only good test batsmen being able to adapt their game to 2020, but good 2020 players being able to turn into really good test batsmen. So I think that's great to see from David Warner, and fantastic job by him in this series. Now, Steve Smith, interesting series for Steve Smith. Didn't have a particularly great one, just the 150 in the 4 innings, but I'd like to point out it's 18 consecutive series in which he has scored at least 150. That's remarkable consistency for Steve Smith. His average overall has now dipped slightly under 60. Wow, he's a really bad player, isn't he? But for Steve Smith, he's really just got himself out. Bizarrely, in this series, he was going along perfectly on 58. Looked like he was going to cruise to yet another test century, was Steve Smith, but then bizarrely missed a ball from Taijul Islam. Just went straight through the gate playing for the spin, which is something that he hasn't done at all. He's been so good in just protecting his pads and stumps, playing the line of the ball, but he had a little bit of a lapse in concentration, Steve Smith. Perhaps it was those humid conditions, and he missed out on a century. And then in the second innings, once again, trying to finish things off quickly, just one was a little bit too close to cut, and he got an inside edge to Mushfiqur. So again, I wouldn't look too much into that second innings dismissal, but for Steve Smith, we all know what an incredible batsman he is, and he's proven himself in Asia already. Got the 3 centuries in the Indian tour. He also got a century on the Sri Lankan tour. He's a complete player, Steve Smith, and this blip, if you can call it that, is certainly nothing more than just that. There is no terminal decline here for Steve Smith. It's just a minor blip, and knowing the guy he is, he's worked so hard to become the batsman he is after looking like a bunny, really, when he came onto the test scene. I have no doubt that he will bounce back from this and have a fantastic Ashes campaign. Peter Handscomb finally made use of a start in the first innings. He got to 82, and he was really struggling throughout the innings, wasn't he, Peter Handscomb, with the humidity? Found it very difficult, but I got to say kudos for him for sticking it out throughout those difficult times. That kind of mental toughness is exactly what you want to see from your players, and it was a real shame that he got run out. He deserved a century. He was backing up a little bit too far when David Warner was on 99, got a little bit over eager, and Shakib with a great throw found him short. But Peter Handscomb played really well. Once again, his strength against spin was shown. He comes down the wicket and hits the ball straight down the ground really well, can also hit it over the leg side. And that's the thing about Peter Handscomb. Unlike a lot of Australian batsmen, he actually is potentially better against the spin than the faster bowlers. But for Peter Handscomb, we know that he's still in the early days of his career, but the future looks bright. He's only 25, and he's had a good start to his career. Yes, he could have converted more of the starts, but I think that will come with time. You could say that he has a few interesting technical things, that he is a back foot player predominantly, that weird stance that he takes up, and when he's tapping the bat down on the ground, he sort of brings it like a sword almost down instead of like a bat. But I don't think that's an issue. Everyone has their way of playing. Shivnarine Chanderpaul had a strange technique that didn't stop him from scoring over 10,000 test runs. So I don't see a problem with that for Peter Handscomb. Notably also, he is a wicket keeper. So that is another thing that helps this Australian team. If they do want to add an extra batsman, change the dynamic of the team, they can, because Peter Handscomb at a push can keep wickets for them. Maybe not so much as a frontline keeper in Asia, but certainly somewhere in Australia they could get away with Peter Handscomb keeping. And in the second innings, did a good job cleaning up that target, did Peter Handscomb. Now, Glenn Maxwell, interesting series for Glenn Maxwell. Got 38 off 98 in the first innings before he got a little inside edge onto his pad that ballooned to Mushfiqur. A little bit unlucky from Glenn Maxwell, it must be said, the way that ball got to Mushfiqur. But in that first innings, Glenn Maxwell, I think, was caught in two minds how to play. He wasn't playing his natural game. He was pretty defensive, and I don't think he was quite clear in the approach he wanted. And you saw the difference in the second innings when the pressure was off and he was just able to blast the bowling to finish off the game. But for Maxwell, didn't quite succeed in this series, but also didn't fail, didn't manage a 50, but at the same time, he was able to get a start in every innings. And it's been an interesting return to Glenn Maxwell in his Test career from getting that 100 in his comeback game in Ranchi. The next three games have been a little bit lukewarm. And it's going to be interesting to see whether he can keep his place in the team with Hilton Cartwright around. Usman Khawaja set to come back into the team. I think the Shield games at the start of the Australian summer will be very important for him. What I would say is he has to play the Glenn Maxwell way. That doesn't mean completely reckless, but he needs to play in a positive way. Take a leaf out of David Warner's book to play your natural game, but at the same time, you still want to maintain a sense of balance, a sense of playing the ball on its merits, building an innings to get a big score rather than just getting a 20 and a 30 and being happy with that. So that's what Glenn Maxwell has to do, I feel. Hilton Cartwright coming back into the team for his second Test match, and he only had the one innings, did Hilton Cartwright, and it was promising. He was belting the ball to all parts, but in the end, he played with hard hands against Mehedi, nicked one to slip, out for 18. For Cartwright, he looks an awful lot like Shane Watson. He's an excellent striker of the ball, but he plays with hard hands, and that is something you can't do in Asia. But he's clearly a talented batsman, averages over 50 in first-class cricket, and on Australian pitches that he's going to be playing on this summer, where the spinners are not as much of a threat, where he's such a clean ball striker on the flatter pitches, on the harder pitches, the bouncier pitches, he might flourish there, Hilton Cartwright. He again is in the same boat as Glenn Maxwell, is going to have to prove himself at the start of the Sheffield Shield season if he wants a spot in the Ashes team, but I see talent there, if not nowhere yet refined enough. Also, his bowling was very mediocre. This guy should be treated as a batsman. He's nothing more than a part-time medium pacer, much like Glenn Maxwell. Glenn Maxwell is nothing more than a part-timer. Cartwright, same situation. They should be judged as batsmen. Matthew Wade, again, struggled with the bat. Matthew Wade, LBW to an absolute gem from Mustafizur, reverse swinging back into him, and he was caught plumb in front. Since his return to the Test team, Wade has averaged 20 in 10 tests and has just the 150. That is not good enough. Remember, the selectors said he was brought back to replace Peter Neville because he's a better batsman. He has not proven that, Matthew Wade. But I will say this, he was excellent behind the stumps in this game. Took 3 stumpings. When do you ever see that from an Australian keeper? And also some very good catches as well. And I know I criticised him for conceding a lot of byes in the last game, but in this game, he did a much better job. Only the 17 byes in this game, which, given the conditions, is not that bad at all, Matthew Wade. So he kept very well in this game. And admittedly, he has struggled a lot since his comeback, but in this game, he was very good. And another thing about Matthew Wade is that he does get under the skin of the opposition, and that is something the Australians like to do, and he is Nathan Lyon's hype man. I think that Nathan Lyon feeds off Wade's energy, and it's quite difficult to quantify that effect. It's an intangible, but Matthew Wade brings intangibles to the team that I think Australia likes. So I wouldn't be so quick to say that he's definitely not going to be in that team come the Gabba. I think he's still in with the shot, and if he gets runs in the Sheffield Shield, those first 3 games, I think Australia would like to keep him. I think they want to keep him around. That's the thing. And he needs to score runs to justify that, but I think they want to keep Matthew Wade around, and there is not a lot of alternatives. Admittedly, Peter Neville struggled as a Test batsman, although he would be much better in Australian conditions than against spin. Really struggled in Sri Lanka did Peter Neville, and he's a better keeper than Wade. But crucially, he's quiet behind the stumps. And Australian teams love to be loud and aggressive. That's what Wade is. Peter Neville is not that. And I think that's a bigger thing than a lot of people would really lead you to believe. So watch this space on Matthew Wade. But that's it for the Australian batting. It was a lot better in this game, but still the collapses are an issue. Almost every game they are collapsing. And to me, it seems that if Smith or Warner aren't at the crease, they struggle. If one of them isn't at the crease, then it's curtains. Batsmen, when batting with those two, get runs. But if those two aren't there, Australia seem to struggle greatly. They have improved their batting though in Asia. Their plans are a lot better as a whole, and they are a lot more clear in what they want to do. They're not too defensive, but they're not reckless. They've struck a nice balance. It's just that that middle order is not reliable at the end of the day. And even though that tail is pretty decent in Asian conditions, when the ball is spinning, it's difficult to start your innings. And even though they have got some runs, you can't rely on them in these conditions. So that's definitely something that Australia will want to rectify, that middle order going into the Ashes. Certainly question marks around them still. Now, the bowling for Australia, excellent in this game. It's been keeping them in a lot of these tests in Asia recently, and the batting has let them down. But the batting was good in this game. They were able to get a first innings lead, and the bowlers drove home the advantage excellently. I thought Pat Cummins was absolutely fantastic. His figures didn't show it wicketless in the first innings, and boy, was he also struggling with the humidity, Pat Cummins. But in the second innings, got his just rewards with a twofer, and he bowled really, really well. I love his pace, but more than that, it's his relentless attitude. When you've got a guy coming at you, not just bowling fast, but he is putting a lot on that ball. He's bowling good bounces, but he's also mixing that up with really nice length deliveries, just back of the length, getting the ball to bounce, nip off the seam on Asian pitches. Imagine what he's going to be like in Australian conditions or English conditions. The way he's bowled since coming into the team for that third test against India has been nothing short of sensational. And Pat Cummins, the 5-6 years that he was out through injury, boy, were Australia missing a star. Because the way I'm looking at it, if all the Australian bowlers are fully fit, who's the most dangerous? The way Pat Cummins has bowled, he certainly looks like the man. That's despite how good Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood can be. So Pat Cummins, he is a big plus for Australia out of this tour. The pace, the bounces, also the accuracy, the ability to get the ball to move off the seam, and his stamina. Injury prone, yes, but you can't question his stamina. He ran in as the only pace bowler in the team. He kept running in difficult conditions for the fast ball. I was very impressed by Pat Cummins, and again, also shown he can apply himself with the bat. So good signs for Australia. The biggest thing is just keeping their fast bowlers fit. They've got such a great quality in their fast bowlers, but they need to keep them fit. Nathan Lyon, the GOAT, as some call him, he definitely lived up to that nickname in this series. He was absolutely fantastic, Nathan Lyon. And this series, just like for David Warner, this was a breakthrough series. They were joint man of the series, and rightly so. Nathan Lyon, 22 wickets in the series for Nathan Lyon. He took 13 wickets in this game, 6 in the first innings, 7 in the second innings. They're his best match figures in this game. And also, he's now got 12 5-wicket hauls in Test. This was his second 10-wicket haul, first in Asia. He's now the leading wicket taker in Tests this calendar year. And the guy is becoming an elite spinner. I would argue that he's the second best off spinner after Ravichandran Ashwin. And even then, there's an argument for Nathan Lyon. Would you believe it or not? Because Ashwin hasn't quite delivered outside Asia. And with these tours coming up for India, South Africa, England, Australia, if he doesn't perform in those conditions, then you can certainly argue Nathan Lyon is the best off spinner in the world, because he has now shown he is excellent in Asian conditions and he's excellent outside Asia, Nathan Lyon. And his transformation as a bowler has been incredible. If you look at his performances in Asia, he's had 6 series in Asia. The first 3 in Sri Lanka, in India, in the UAE, 8 tests, 26 wickets at an average of 49, strike rate of 76. Look at his last 3 series in Sri Lanka, in India, in Bangladesh. 9 tests, 57 wickets at an average of 23 and a strike rate of 48. What a transformation from Nathan Lyon. The thing that he's been able to do is now adapt to the Asian conditions, because as a guy who's been very successful in Australian conditions, a graveyard for most spinners, he's been able to do that because of the bounce he's able to generate and the overspin he gets on the ball. He gets a lovely loop on the ball, drifts it in very nicely. But what he's added to his arsenal is getting more side spin on the ball, which is what you need to do in Asia, and also improving his control and just bowling it in the same spot almost, letting the variation off the pitch do its work for him. Some balls will go straight on and some will spin. So he's learned how to bowl in these conditions and now is quite simply lethal. We saw in the first innings, just putting that in the right area, letting the variation of the pitch do its talking, he was able to get the top 4 batsmen, all left-handers, all out LBW. The ball just went straight on with the arm and they all missed it. That is what you've got to do in Asian conditions. Put the ball there, let the pitch do the rest. And Nathan Lyon has been unplayable in this series, and I think he deserves a lot of respect. A guy who's been ridiculed throughout his career, and I, for the majority of his career, have thought he's okay, but he's not anything amazing. Well, he certainly is amazing now. So credit to Nathan Lyon. The fact that he still isn't even 30 years of age, 500 test wickets, certainly a big possibility. So well done to Nathan Lyon on this series. Now, Steve O'Keefe, very interesting selection, suspended from New South Wales cricket, yet playing for the Australian cricket team, had an alcohol-fueled incident in which he acted inappropriately towards a fellow Australian cricketer, a female Australian cricketer. And it was interesting, John Hastings came out during the game questioning the selection, saying, why didn't John Holland get picked? I also thought that John Holland would get picked, as he's been excellent in the Shield last season, and he did really well in that intra-squad practice game the Australians had in Darwin before going on this tour. But Steve O'Keefe, it seemed like a bit of a panic from the Australian selectors picking him. I still question, even if you consider Steve O'Keefe to be the better bowler than John Holland, the fact that he hadn't played cricket since that last test match against India, that's 4 months without match practice, and it showed. So certainly I get the feeling that as Australia won't be playing a test in Asia now for at least a few years, with Steve O'Keefe, the wrong side of 30, having these issues, I think he may have played his last test. Wicketless in the first innings, he did take 2 in the second, bowled a lot better, but you could see that he was dropping short quite a lot, Steve O'Keefe, and his best feature is his accuracy, and that wasn't quite there in the first innings, although he much improved in the second. But still, I look at the next guy I'm going to talk about as his successor, Ashton Agar. Ashton Agar, I think when you look at him, he's nearly 10 years younger than Steve O'Keefe, and he's a better batsman. Steve O'Keefe can certainly hang around, but Ashton Agar's got a much wider repertoire of strokes, and he's a better fielder, Ashton Agar, and maybe Steve O'Keefe is a slightly better bowler than him now, but really, in a few years' time, Ashton Agar will overtake him, and he's much improved since those tests he played against England. Ashton Agar, he's taken 7 wickets in this series and provided a really good foil to Nathan Lyon. He's been very accurate, not a particularly big spinner of the ball, but again, he's let the variation off the pitch do the work for him, and that's how he's got his wickets. He's a tall bowler. He's able to generate some bounce. That's particularly how he accounted for Shakib in the first innings when he was trying to cut that delivery, bounced a little bit extra. So I like Ashton Agar, and to me now, he is Australia's second spinner. He will be the go-to guy for tests in Asia, and also potentially at the SCG, which is the only venue that Australia regularly play 2 spinners at home. But that's it for Australia. They can be pleased, certainly, with the comeback. Still things to improve on. By no means a perfect team, but I think a very positive game for Australia, and they'll be looking ahead to the Ashes now with a lot more confidence than they were a week ago. Now into Bangladesh, and this was a disappointing test for Bangladesh. After the win in the first game, having Australia on the ropes, then winning the toss in the first innings, they didn't bat well, and in the second innings, they managed to bat even worse. I thought that both innings the top order failed, reduced to 117 for 5, and then in the second, 43 for 5. That's not good enough. And the pitch was pretty flat on those first 2 days, and 305 was under par. And they were lucky to get there thanks to that lower order push. The top order just struggled, and they fell into the trap that we criticize a lot of non-Asian players for, and that's playing for the spin when it isn't there. When the pitch isn't spinning much, why are you playing for spin? In any case, I think the batsman, the best approach is to play for no spin in Asia, because if it spins a bit, hey, that is something you can't control. Those balls are often just going to miss your bat. They're not going to get you out. It's the ones that don't spin that get you out more often than not. And the Bangladeshi batsmen fell into that trap in the first innings. In the second innings, I thought they were very reckless, kind of typical Bangladesh. It was the old Bangladesh coming to the fore, talented but reckless. And the approach was wrong, I feel. The pitch, yes, it was taking more spin and there was more uneven bounce, but it wasn't impossible to bat on. I think Bangladesh could have done a lot better in that second innings. They weren't out of the game having conceded that 72-run lead. They could have easily got to 250 and set Australia 180. That would have been really, really interesting. But they ultimately let themselves down in their application, Bangladesh. But a bit of perspective, it's still a positive series for Bangladesh, and they continue to develop as a team. At home in tests in the last 3 years, they've won 5, they've drawn 4, and they've lost 3. They have a positive record at home recently. Yes, they're still not particularly competitive away from home, but the start is to be a competitive team at home, and they are more than that. They're by no means an elite test team. They're not a team that's going to dominate you throughout a series, but they're a team that is going to put up a fight, and they should be playing more tests. They need to be getting 3 test series, play more tests. They've got some great, talented players. They will develop. The future is bright for Bangladesh, but I think expectations may have got a little bit blown out of proportion thanks to recent success. It's still going to take time for Bangladesh to become a power on the world stage. But for Bangladesh, the batting, I will begin with that. And Tamim Iqbal had a disappointing game. A rarity for Tamim, managed just the 12 and the 8 in the respective innings. In the first one, well, as I said, playing for spin when it wasn't there against Nathan Lyon, trapped in front. But the second innings dismissal, coming down the pitch, Lyon bowled it beautifully, to be fair, pushing it wider, dropping it shorter. But he was nowhere near the pitch of the ball, then just pokes at it and gets stumped by a mile. That was very questionable from Tamim, and I've applauded him for becoming a more refined player and a more mature player in recent times. He started his career very brash, reckless, but he's matured, he's mellowed with age. But this was a throwback to the old Tamim, and I didn't like it. Hopefully just a blip for Tamim. We know what a fantastic batsman he is, but it was disappointing to see the way he played in this game. Shumishaka, again, disappointing game in the first innings. Once again, playing for spin when it wasn't there against Nathan Lyon. In the second, he was undone, completely turned over by Pat Cummins, and he nicked off to Matt Renshaw in the slips. Shumishaka managed just the 65 in 4 innings in this series, so he certainly struggled. And while he's been decent since returning to the team as an opener, there haven't been the meaningful contributions that Bangladesh would have hoped for. He hasn't managed a test century since his comeback, and when I look at him play, I don't think he's an opener. He's not, after all. He's a middle-order batsman, manufactured opener. I don't see him long-term being an opener. His technique isn't quite rigid enough. He's a talented stroke maker, but his technique is not that of a test opener, Shumishaka. And when I talk about the next man, the whole thing becomes a much more bizarre situation for Bangladesh. Imrul Kais, he struggled greatly yet again. He went for the sweep against Nathan Lyon. The ball didn't spin, but that shouldn't really matter for a sweep. I don't know how he missed that, Imrul Kais. And then in the second innings, it did grip and bounce a bit, that ball from Nathan Lyon, but bizarrely popped it straight to Glenn Maxwell at short cover. Imrul managed just the 17 runs in this series in the 4 games, so he made next to no contribution for Bangladesh. And as I said, the whole Shumya Imrul situation is a bit bizarre. Imrul, when he came back into the team in 2014, since then, as an opener, he's averaged over 50, been fantastic partnering Tamim. But then he was injured before that second test against New Zealand. Shumya was drafted in to open the batting. He's done reasonably well, so he kept his place. And when Imrul came back against Sri Lanka, he was shoehorned into the team at the number 3 position. But Imrul Kais is not a number 3. He's an opening batsman, and he should be opening the batting for Bangladesh. But now the problem is, does he justify a place for the next series, given his poor form? That series coming up very soon against South Africa. I think he should. I think they should go back to him and Tamim at opener. I feel like the South Africa series is no time to throw some debutant in to open the batting. He is much better equipped to open the batting than Shumya Shark, I believe, Imrul Kais, but he needs to get out of this slump quick fix. Now, Nasir Hussain, I say him first because he actually came in at number 4 in the second innings, came in at 8 in the first innings, and Nasir Hussain, he did a good job in the first innings. He's not a guy to play defensively, got a nice 45 to get Bangladesh up to that target, but then in the second innings, failed. His first innings dismissal, he just nicked one that was a bit too close to cut from Ashton Agar, and in the second innings, slashing at one off Steve O'Keefe that took his edge to Steve Smith at slip. Now, Nasir Hussain, again, hasn't had a particularly great series, 73 in 4 innings. I believe that he was brought up to number 4 in the second innings because Bangladesh wanted to break up the left-handers a bit. Incredibly, if you looked at the order on the team sheet, they had the top 5 as left-handers, which is quite remarkable. So he was brought in there to break that up, no doubt, seeing what happened in that first innings. Mushfiqur did that because of that. But I question Nasir's place in the team, particularly as he didn't bowl. Mushfiqur was not keen to go to Nasir as a bowler, and he's a batting all-rounder. So if he's not bowling, he's not really anything more than number 7. So again, is he a better batsman than Mahmudullah? Absolutely not, in my opinion. Mahmudullah hasn't had the best test career, and he hasn't been in the best of form, but this is a guy who's done it time and time again for Bangladesh in the one-day format. He's an experienced player. He's got a really good head on his shoulders, calm player, excellent temperament, Mahmudullah. He bowls just as well as Nasir Hussain as well. So I don't see how Nasir is in the team ahead of Mahmudullah. That again boggles my mind. Now, Shakib Al Hasan had a poor game, but just to stick to his batting, this was the reason why Shakib is not a top batsman. He's a good batsman, but he's not an elite test batsman because he does have quite a few brain fades. He's a mercurial player, and we saw that in the first innings, a little bit too close to cut, and he edged one through to Wade. And in the second innings, that one was a disappointing dismissal, pushing with hard hands, feeling for the ball, and edging one to Warner at second slip off line. Shakib is an aggressive batsman, loves to feel bat on ball, but he needs to temper his game a bit. Now, the issue is that Shakib has repeatedly said, after similar questionable dismissals, that this is the way he plays and no one's going to change it. And admittedly, it has brought him great success. But as a senior player in the team, I think sometimes you need to read the situation a little bit better. And Shakib has been guilty of giving his wicket away way too easily at times. Again, it's about finding the balance. You don't have to play defensively. You can still be proactive, but play the percentages a little bit more. That's what I would say for Shakib's batting. Mushfiqur Rahim, he was the best Bangladeshi batsman in this game, 68 in the first innings and 31 in the second. I like Mushfiqur a lot as a batsman. He's averaged 67 in tests in 2017. He's in a purple patch, and I love his application. He's got a very solid defense, good technique, but he's also able to score, and he's a real fighter, is Mushfiqur. Now, why isn't he batting at 4? That's what I don't understand. He's batting too low at number 6, I feel. When you look at this batting order, it needs a little bit more stability at the top of the order. Mushfiqur would provide that. And yes, you can argue about the wicket keeping. I think that is secondary to him batting at 4. If he has to give up the gloves to bat at 4, then so be it. But I think that is crucial for Bangladesh to get their best test batsman at the moment batting in a key position. So I hope that Bangladesh can do that soon, but he was a little bit unlucky in the first innings, Mushfiqur. got an unlucky deflection onto the stumps off Lyon, and then in the second innings outdone by some fantastic bowling from Pat Cummins, but he fought really well, so he should be proud of himself. Sabir Rahman, again, he did pretty well in this test. He got 66 in the first innings, 24 in the second. In the first, a bizarre stumping. He just overbalanced, missed a pull shot, and Matthew Wade timed that excellently to dismiss him. And in the second innings, that was very poor. Stumped yet again, and it did keep low, to be fair, so he was a bit unlucky. But he was just coming down the pitch like that to defend the ball. That was a bit odd with the way Lyon was getting the ball to talk. But Sabir, again, he has all the shots. He's a fantastic stroke maker and he plays his shots. He's not one to shy away from that. But again, he's someone who needs to play the percentages a little bit more. In that second innings, he was so reckless, I thought. Trying to play those reverse sweeps when Lyon was getting it to rip out of the rough, was just asking for trouble. And he was riding his luck throughout that innings until he finally was stumped yet again. Sabir needs to cool it down a little bit. If you look at his test career, I don't think he's even got to 70 once. He does average in the low 30s, clearly talented, but he needs to play more substantial innings. And he has to be batting at, I think, 7. He's a number 7. He's nothing more than that at the moment because he hasn't shown that he's capable of playing the big innings. But I must say he did do a good job in the first innings, and he's again a very talented player. Just needs to be refined a bit more. Now, the last player to talk about in the batting is Mominul Haq on his return to the team. He was very nuggety as usual, 31 in the first innings until again from Lyon, played for spin when there wasn't any. And then in the second innings, he top-edged one from Lyon that gripped and bounced, and it was a fantastic catch at short fine leg from Pat Cummins. But Mominul showed his ability as a test batsman. Why oh why he was batting at 8 in the second innings, I don't know. Yes, the whole breaking up the left-handers thing with Nasir Hussain, but come on. He's one of your best test batsmen. Batting him at 8, that's a waste. Batting with the tail. Mominul is a fantastic player. He averages 46 in test cricket. He just had a little blip. He had 2 bad games, and Bangladesh dropped him. Remember that Bangladesh don't play an awful lot of test cricket. It's difficult for a guy like Mominul to get some continuity. So I think that was very harsh. And Mominul has an excellent technique, and there have been question marks about his ability to play off spin, but I thought he played Nathan Lyon quite well. Yes, he got out to him 2 times, but he was able to thwart him for long periods in both innings. So Mominul, I think, he's a very short batsman, but he makes up for that in his heart. He's a talented stroke maker as well, and he has an excellent technique. He's a true test batsman, and he has to be in this team. Hopefully, he can get more starts as he cements himself back in the team and build on those starts, make some more meaningful contributions. But the theme of my analysis has been that this batting order for Bangladesh is an absolute mess. I think that going to South Africa, they should have Imrul opening with Tamim, number 3 Mominul, 4 Mushfiqur, 5 Shakib, 6 Mahmudullah, 7 Sabir. That's how it should go. Mushfiqur take the gloves if he has to take the gloves, and then you say, okay, I can't bat at 4. Then Mahmudullah could bat at 4, Mushfiqur bat at 6. Mahmudullah is a much better option at 4 than someone like Sabir or Nasir Hussain. So that's how I would go. Shumya Shaka would be a backup batsman for me on that tour. Litan Das, if you want to play a keeper other than Mushfiq. But Bangladesh need to fix this batting order because it's a real mess at the moment. So that's something they'll definitely need to do going to South Africa. As for the bowling, Mustafizur was excellent, I thought, in this game. And I've talked about the fact that if you don't have a lot of pace in Asia for a fast bowler, it's very difficult to get wickets. But Mustafizur makes up for that in his skill. He's one of the most skillful fast bowlers in world cricket. And I thought he was excellent in this game. Now, I thought that the bouncer he bowled to Warner in the first innings, that's something that I didn't actually think he had in his locker, but it was great to see him bowl that delivery. Got a little bit lucky with the Renshaw dismissal, but then the dismissal of Wade, beautiful reverse swing. That was fantastic stuff from Mustafiz, and then he got Lyon out to boot. 4 for in the first innings of a game for a fast bowler. No mean feat. And the crazy thing is that in the last 4 home tests Bangladesh have played, the 5 tests, the 5 wickets that Mustafizur has taken in this game are the only wickets a Bangladeshi fast bowler has taken. That is incredible. Their reliance on spinners is an issue, and that is why they are still not competitive away from home. They need to develop the fast bowlers if they're going to become a more rounded team. Mustafizur, obvious talent with his ability to bowl reverse, his control, his cutters, the slower ball. He's a class bowler, Mustafizur Rahman. But guys like Tuskin, we know he's quick, but does he have the control? Can he do something with the ball? Then there's guys like Rubul Hussain, Kamrul Islam Rabi, Subhashish Roy, all these kind of guys that are just not quite there, but they need to identify bowlers. They've got Courtney Walsh as the bowling coach. Identify those bowlers and really try to develop them, because that's something that Bangladesh has to do if they're going to become a really good team. But now on to Mehedi. And Mehedi, I thought, was reasonably decent in this game. He didn't bowl in the second innings after he got hit on his spinning finger by a Pat Cummins bouncer. But in the first innings, he did a reasonable job. I think, again, the control wasn't quite there. Still does drop short a little bit too much for my liking, but he's a very good bowler. Mehedi, only 19 still, and he's a beautiful traditional off-spin bowler that bowls class off-spin. He has just the one delivery, but he bowls it really well. And for Mehedi Hassan, it's just about developing as he gets more experience, as he gets older. I'm sure he'll get better and become one of the best spinners in the world. He's already had a great start to his test career, 43 wickets in his first 9 games. The world is his oyster, as he also can hold the bat. We know that as well. Could be one of the best test all-rounders in a few years' time. Now, Shakib, as I said, with the batting, poor game. Likewise for his bowling, was a poor game. And the issue I had for Shakib in this one, yes, it wasn't as helpful, but he didn't quite get the bite that he usually does, Shakib, and he did not quite land the ball the way he would have liked. So again, with Shakib, we know what a fantastic bowler he is. This was just a real off game for him, just the 1 wicket in each innings for him. But I have no doubt he'll bounce back as such an elite test player does usually. Now, Taijul Islam, again, he struggled as well in the second innings, bowled a lot of poor deliveries, particularly to David Warner, that Warner just creamed. Too short, too full. He had a similar issue in the first test, although that was only intermittently, but this test, it was more prevalent throughout both innings, and that was disappointing for Taijul. He needs to be better than that. As a third spinner, you don't have much margin for error because he's only going to get picked in home tests. He has to deliver if he's going to survive. But he's had a great start to his test career, Taijul. As I said in the last podcast, the second quickest Bangladeshi to 50 test wickets. So hopefully, again, just a blip for him. And that's it for Bangladesh in this game. And the last few things I want to touch on for Bangladesh, the captaincy from Mushfiqur, again, left a lot to be desired. I thought the way he marshaled the troops on that second evening when Hanscom and Warner were batting, Hanscom particularly struggling with the humidity, and he just put the field out, let them take as many singles as they wanted. Very little pressure on the bowlers. He was bowling Mominul, he was bowling Nasir, Sabir. That was quite bizarre from Mushfiq. It wasn't like Australia were way ahead of the game. Yes, they were in a decent position, but a few wickets and it would have been right back even. So that was quite weird from Mushfiqur to relieve the pressure on an Australian team that was under a lot of pressure. So I find that quite confusing from him. And as I said before, I don't know whether he was the one behind the changes to the batting lineup, but that left me scratching my head too. But kind of ties into the whole Mushfiqur's role thing. He has so many jobs in this team as one of the leading batsmen, the wicketkeeper, the captain. Does he have too many roles? I think Bangladesh, they've been really in between on what they want Mushfiqur to do. Is he going to keep? Is he not going to keep? Where is he going to bat? I think they need to just give him a clear role, and that would also help his captaincy, I feel. The last thing about Bangladesh was the fielding was disappointing in that first innings. They could have restricted Australia a lot better if their fielding was better. Mehedi dropped a sitter. Shumya didn't even get hands to one at slip that he should have caught. And Bominal also dropped one at short leg. They were sloppy in the field, Bangladesh. And that has been something that they've slowly tried to eradicate, a stereotype from Bangladesh cricket being poor cricketers. Over time, they have improved. But in this game, fell back into old habits. Against teams like Australia, if they're going to beat them, they have to be close to their best still to beat these teams. They're not some amazing team that they can make a lot of mistakes. and beat teams like Australia. They're not quite at that level yet. So that's something that Bangladesh do need to look at. But that's it for my review of this game. That's it for the series. As I said, disappointing that we didn't get a decider, but nonetheless, two fantastic games of Test cricket. I thought very well hard fought. I thought it was interesting to see that there was a real competitive spirit. The fact that the Aussies and the Bangladeshis were both sledging in equal part. If anything, that's a compliment to Bangladesh, how far they've come, that Australia are employing those tactics against them. So that added a bit of spice to it, and I also felt that it never really got out of hand. So that was quite interesting to see. But for Australia, they move on to a limited overs tour of India before the big one, the Ashes, in the home summer. For Bangladesh, in a couple of weeks, big series for them. They've got a full tour of South Africa. That's a tough test of their credentials. That's a test of their credentials as an away team now. We've seen they're good at home. Can they start to improve away from home? That's the next step on pitches that they are not familiar at all with. But that'll certainly be interesting to see. But that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, you can check it out. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. All those links can be found on the Twitter page. But until next time, thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.